don't do the thing that they tell you to do, which is just grind yourself to the bone and give up all of those creative habits, because they're really, really hard to bring back once you've let that time and space go.
So, Emily, thank you for joining us. I'd like to start this interview just with the introduction to who you are and what kind of things you make whenever you're not doing your I don't want to call it a day job, but of course, all the big things that you're running right now.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Emily Best. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the mother of two elementary school children. My husband is an actor, and we live outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark and Film Forward. Outside of all of those roles, when I get to make things, my art is writing. So I do make motion pictures, and I do like it, but my actual art form is writing. I actually finished the draft of a book this year, that is loosely memoir and short stories. And that's actually how I show up as an artist. When I make motion pictures, my favorite way to make them as a writer director is short form. So web series or short film. And then obviously I support a lot of other projects, usually as a producer or executive producer. And I've done that in like every motion picture media except for TV. I don't think I've ever produced anything for TV. So yeah.
How did you come into writing? Was this something that you've been doing all of your life? Did you come into it later in life? Can you kind of tell us a bit about your beginnings into becoming a writer?
Yeah, I mean, both my parents were writers. They went to grad school for writing. They met in grad school for writing, and they had this incredible community of writers around them, but both of them chose like sort of more stable careers instead of pursuing writing full time. I mean, my dad was a journalist, so that is writing full time. Um, but yeah, they went pretty far away from their creative writing from a career perspective. And so I think I grew up naturally with the approach that like writing is something that's always on. Like I was an avid journaler and, would write things for the school newspaper. And I went to a writers program for young creative writers at Columbia University when I was like 15. Just
Nice.
was really, really into especially short form and short fiction. Um, and and yeah, it's just sort of been always on. And what I love about it is like you don't need anything. Like I have a notebook and a pen and there I can be a writer. That part is very satisfying to me. And I still have not adapted my writing practice to the digital age. Like my writing practice is still very much pen to paper. And my handwriting is terrible these days. But yeah, it just and I fell away from it for a really long time building Seed&Spark, and then um came back to it through an absolutely amazing class that is taught by these two women who actually live in Spain, but the workshop is taught in English and it's called Right Where You Are. And for anyone out
Wow.
there who is interested in like building a sustainable writing practice, I cannot recommend this workshop enough. They just really understand how to build a container for writers that can keep you going. So yeah, I've had to come back to it with workshops in order to maintain it, where I used to have a more regular practice. Like work always gets in the way. When I mentor young people, especially in the startup space now, but also people, trying to establish a sustainable creative career. Like, don't do the thing that they tell you to do, which is just grind yourself to the bone and give up all of those creative habits, because they're really, really hard to bring back once you've let that time and space go.
Mm.
And I think about how much more clear-headed and capable I feel when I have even just an hour a week dedicated to creative practice. And that doesn't sound like a lot to somebody who's got it, but if you have lost it, an hour a week seems insurmountable. So yeah, my big advice these days is don't give up that practice for anything. Don't grind over it if you can avoid it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I like to just go ahead and get into Seed and Spark. What made you come to the idea of wanting to do this particular type of crowdsourcing platform?
Yeah, need, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. I was making a film with a group of friends about women friendships, and we had enough connections that we were getting meetings with sales agents and distributors, and then they were telling us incredibly unhelpful things like there's no audience for a movie about female friendships, or my favorite is if you could put some lesbian erotica in it, we could sell it. Except they didn't even mean lesbian erotica for lesbians. They were basically saying if you could figure out how to make this, if you could figure out how to make women friendships sexy for men, then we would
Mm.
know what to do with it. And I was like, forget you guys. Like, we needed to raise funding independently. And Kickstarter and Indiegogo were brand new, and most people that we knew were actually not familiar with those platforms, except for the artists in our immediate circle, and those were not the people that had money to spare. So I built a little WordPress website with the help of my roommate at the time, and we put a PayPal link in the bottom, and then we listed every individual item we would need to borrow or fund in order to make the movie. And it was like a wedding registry. And we sent that link to every single person that we knew. And we used, Facebook used to have a function called Notes. It was back when Facebook had a Substack, is what I like to say. Back then, this sort of thing was very novel on the internet, right? And this is, I mean, we're talking extremely early days of Twitter. Like we did this, I don't know, the year that Twitter launched or the year after Twitter launched. These are still early days, even of Facebook. A lot of the social platforms we use regularly. Instagram was only still photographs, heavily filtered still photographs. So some of the tools and the way that we think about them today simply weren't available back then. And part of the novelty we learned about the wish list is it gave people something to talk about and think about of like, oh, I'm a nurse, I'm going to send them the first aid kit. Or, oh, I'm a foodie, I want to make sure they have good coffee. And so we started to see people contributing to projects in ways that they personally identified with, even if they were not filmmakers. And it made what we did kind of legible to the people outside of our direct industry. And we needed to raise $20,000 in cash in a pretty short period of time so we could like get to set. And we raised 23,000 in cash and literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans and gifts of locations and goods and services. My favorite example was because we had this list of items that we needed, I was doing all sorts of kind of interesting outreach. And I reached out to all of the local car dealerships where we were going to film. And this used car salesman got back to me and asked to read the script. And then he read the script and he recommended the two cars that he thought our main characters would drive. And we agreed with him and he gave them to us for free for 6 weeks.
That is incredible. That's that
Um,
becomes the other side, I think, of relationship building that comes through using a platform like this. And then, of
yeah,
course, to your side, just being able to go and do that marketing. We're gonna get into the distribution part of it later, but I think that's going to be a bit of a foreshadowing to that, and just
yep,
understanding past getting receiving funds, how many different things can happen from having that effort planned out.
that's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, once we had that experience, filmmakers from all over the country started reaching out to me to ask me how we did it. And that was when I thought maybe there is a place in the market for creators who need to build audiences as a part of their craft. I mean, every creator needs an audience in order to build a sustainable living. What was very interesting about what happened to us is those sales agents and distributors who initially told us there was no audience came back around and said, wait, how many email addresses do you have? How many people got involved? And so we already saw that we could influence the gatekeepers if we had the information and we had the direct connection to the audience, right? That they weren't making such smart decisions around how they were keeping the gates.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because the audience will always know best. But
That's
like, yeah, to your point, I think those numbers really start to scream out to people who aren't in this space, and then you just tell them, okay, this isn't just some little film that we put together. There's a substantial audience around this that can be mobilized in different ways. So yeah. Can you speak to what do you think? Because you guys boast projects that start campaigns on Seed and Spark boast an 82% success rate, right? That's incredible. And I'm hearing again the pinpointing and making a relationship with your audience and making sure that they understand past the film being made how it relates to them. What do you think contributes to projects like being greenlit so frequently on this platform compared to others?
two things. We provide a ton of upfront education. So, like the vast majority of creators who end up crowdfunding on Seed and Spark at some point have taken a workshop from us out in the world. We teach about 100, 150 live workshops a year. We go to a lot of film festivals, especially regional film festivals. We really try to get into the communities where creators are both like getting their careers started or sustaining them because you can still afford a house, right? Like we want to go there and make sure you have all of the resources that you need no matter where you are. So the education is one, and the feedback is the second. So we have a real live human expert review every single crowdfunding project that comes through the platform and give targeted feedback to ensure you're set up for success. And just to be clear, like I crowdfunded recently for my feature film Ratified, and I got feedback and she was right. Like, and I'm considered one of like the world's foremost experts on film crowdfunding. And
Yeah.
I also deeply benefited from the feedback. It's not that we're going to prevent people necessarily from launching without taking our feedback, but what we see is they're usually in the 18%,
Mm.
right? Because a lot of our feedback just has to do very simply with like outreach strategies, goal size. Um, and what we really try to do is expectation set with creators that like, if you have done a ton of audience building in advance of crowdfunding, you can be really aggressive about your goals. If you are brand new to audience building, you either need to take the time to do some audience building before you crowdfund, or you need to understand that you've got to level set your goal and maybe engage in staged financing. So part of what we're
Nice.
trying to do is partner with creators to make sure that they can take the next step wherever they are in the journey. What we don't want creators to do is try to launch a $100,000 crowdfunding campaign when they've never done a day of audience building, fail miserably and feel bad about it, right? Like that's not the goal. The goal is to make crowdfunding surmountable for literally anyone.
Mm. That is super important. I just know that across the board, it can be very easy. Some people just have that thing where it's like, no, we're going to go and do it. And no matter what, we're going to figure out a way. But like, when you don't see some of those early um, people donating and different things like that, it can be a disheartening kind of experience. But I can also speak to anyone listening to this. I can speak to the testament of having a project be supported on Seed and Spark, as well as having the feedback that comes with that. Because that was such, even past us having our campaign there, it helped us really like get our marketing and our distribution caps on and figuring out, okay, well, yeah, we do want to like take this through film festivals. But even past that, like, where's the home of this film going to be? Like, what do we want this? How do we want people to be able to access this once we're done moving around wherever it's accepted to screen? So just you guys are doing incredible work with that. So thank you for being able to offer the education on top of the platform. On the same note of marketing and distribution, I'd love to kind of transition over into the distribution playbook.
Yeah.
Can you give us a just brief summary about what that is? Because this again is just going to be a game changer for so many people in the sense of how they view where their project can go. And I hope hopefully early enough in the process of making their projects, they start considering these different things that's in this playbook. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So back in 2019, uh, really end of 2018, we started to hear from creators that the dramatic shift in the landscape of distribution that was being brought about by streaming was both making people feel like, gosh, maybe there's more opportunity than ever, but I'm less clear than ever about how to capitalize on it. And it was changing the way festivals programmed. It was changing the way distributors pick things up. It was changing windows. It was changing everything really fast. And creators the question that we kept getting in our crowdfunding workshops is like, but can you help me? Can you do the same workshop, but for distribution? So we went and we worked with a bunch of subject matter experts in impact distribution, theatrical distribution, television, et cetera. And we put together a comprehensive workshop called the Distribution Down Low. This workshop, 65 slides, like 2.5 hours on the high side. It was hard to teach at best. But the same amount of change that had happened in the previous 5 years that was making people really anxious has happened in the last 5 years, right? And I spend a lot of time with Christy Marchese, who was the founder of Picture Motion, one of the most remarkable impact distribution consultancies that's out there. She also went on to found Kinema, which is a platform that I am using right now for my film that makes it super easy to book non-theatrical, private screenings, organizational screenings. We spent a lot of time talking about where the market was going and how quickly it was shifting and how much time we were spending in private and workshops on panels talking about this. And I said, I wish there was a way to just make the distribution download like available to everyone. And then we settled on what a resource it might be if there was like a totally open source distribution playbook that everybody could not only pull from, but contribute to, because of how fast the landscape is shifting. If you were to write this down in some sort of static form, like a book, it would be worthless almost like 3 months from now. Do you know what I mean? Like it would just, and take it from somebody, like we have a workshop up on Seed&Spark that we recorded almost 10 years ago. And like the stuff in there is pretty stale at this point. Like the practices are all evergreen, but like any of the platforms that we mentioned, forget it, right?
Yeah.
So Christy and I just like sort of set a deadline for ourselves that we would launch this thing at Tribeca. And we used the distribution down low as a framework. And then we built everything using this platform called Notion, which is just like it's sort of perfect if you're going to build kind of a brain, like an institutional brain. And what we're hoping is that the distribution down low kind of operates as this institutional brain for independent distribution. But I want to be really clear about something because I get very agitated when people complement the distribution playbook as if it is a solution. It's not. It is a resource. And people are like, oh, you've democratized distribution. I'm like, no, we created the right to vote.
There we go.
The thing about the right to vote is the right to vote itself is not democracy. Exercising the right to vote is democracy. You can abstain from participating in democracy, sure, and that's up to you. But the resource itself is not the solution. Using it and sharing what you've done and building new infrastructure with it, that is the democratization of distribution. So I always just caution people to say, like, the fact that this thing exists doesn't mean anything if we don't use it. So I'm really hopeful that creators can navigate their way through it easily, can build really interesting distribution plans, and then contribute back their learnings and their infrastructure. Because I think there are so many new ways to distribute. I'll use my own film as an example. So Ratified, it's a feature documentary about the 100-year struggle to enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment in the US Constitution. The US Constitution is the only constitution without protections for gender equality, the only modern constitution. And the Equal Rights Amendment is the only amendment we have ever fully ratified as a nation that has not been published in the Constitution. It's extremely infuriating. That's why we made a movie about it. There are myriad organizations across law, politics, activism, education that are excited to use this film as a tool to talk about gender equality in their specific category. And this is a network that we're building that is really doing a lot of work for us in terms of distribution. And they are hungry for more things like this. Because once they use this tool in a certain community, well, they've used it, right? They can't use it again. It would be
Yeah.
really nice if we could point to something else and be like, we'll use this one next. And so what I'm doing is I already have a succession plan in terms of like, who are the creators that I am passing this infrastructure off to so they can use it next. And I think if we start doing that as independent creators, where like we build something that's really working and then we don't just walk away from it or like guard it to ourselves because it's going to be too long before you make your next film for it to be relevant. We pass it around, right? The same way that we're all passing around the same $25 in everybody's crowdfunding campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Like we just have a lending circle going ultimately. I feel the same way about some of these distribution connections and strategies. And so we can pass them around and really build infrastructure that way. But we have to do that work. Like nobody's going to save us. Nobody's going to come do that work for us. And it's why I just say like the distribution playbook is not a solution. It is a resource for you to participate in the solution that we collectively will benefit from, right? That's the goal for what's next.
I love that. I love that, one thing that you pointed out first, please, 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 if you're listening to this and you are in the space where this absolutely applies to a problem that you're having, take the hour to just go onto the website. I'll keep the link in the description. Just to just really like dig through it. There's everything there. Text, there are videos, there are case studies, anything that you would need to really apply what you're learning to something that you're doing on your own. As we kind of bring this to a close, just two last quick things. Generally speaking, as we move beyond just Seed&Spark or the distribution playbook,
Yeah.
what advice would you pass off to indie filmmakers about making their projects in the sense of it can be in the crowdsourcing space, it can be in the distribution space, it can be in the production space. What would you just like to pass off to people who, you've been in their shoes before?
I'm going to say this and I'm going to say maybe it doesn't apply to everybody, but my experience in every kind of project I have been involved with, whether it is a feature or a documentary, whether it's narrative or documentary, feature, short, whatever, when we have been incredibly focused on the audience that we want to reach, everything around the project becomes like fun and exciting and creative and generative. As soon as we focus on the industry, it becomes hard and onerous and like Sisyphusian, right? And so I would just say that I think some creators are sort of raised with this idea that, like, we're raised in pick me culture, honestly. We're raised in like, yeah, but I'm special enough for them to come down on high and pick me. And it's like, maybe, but so what? Like, what does your work matter if just some people in the industry like it? It's really only interesting if audiences are moved. And so yeah, so I would just say that in my personal experience, when I have focused on the audience, everything breaks open and becomes the thing that I look for. Like I make art for connection. That's why I make art. And that is where I find it is when I am focused on who this art is for, in the real world and not inside, Hollywood or the film industry at large. And the other thing I would say is like what I said before is like nobody's coming to save us. We are going to save us. And that can seem sad or we can feel mad about it, or we can be excited that at least like for the most part, we're sharing a value system and that's going to help us move forward together.
Thank you for that. Where can we find Ratified? Is that available for streaming anywhere?
Not yet, but you can if you'd like to host a private screening of Ratified. And if you'd like to do that, you can contact us through the website, ratifythefilm.com. And you can just reach out. We have right through there, you can fill out your information and contact us, and we will make it possible for you. And then we do have a potential TV deal on the table for next year, but hopefully it's playing somewhere in your community really soon, which you would also see on the website.
Beautiful. And last thing, what's next for Seed&Spark?
Oh man, I mean, we're so excited about the work next year. I think you're going to see us doing a lot more community gathering. Because I think if we are all in this together and we are all sort of agreed that we have to save us, then we got to hang out together and swap ideas. So a lot more of that next year.